Welcome to our home. Marcy and I were married just over 39 years ago. And immediately after our wedding, after Sheva Brachos, a week after our wedding, we moved to Israel for the year. Marcy was working in a bank. I was studying in yeshiva. And we were working hard. We were living on a limited budget, which did not include much money for eating out. And there was one restaurant that we found that was very inexpensive, and we were able to go there a couple of times. It was a tiny dairy Italian restaurant named Mamma Mia's. And it was located on Rehov Rabbi Akiva, very close to Ben Yehuda, and the food was delicious. And what we would do is, they also had good big portions. So we could get a bowl of soup and split it, and we could get a main course and split it, and we were full, and it was a great meal. And the dish that they had that was our favorite was eggplant Parmesan. Now, I know you had tasted eggplant Parmesan, I had tasted eggplant Parmesan, but this version was unique. And it was absolutely my favorite version that I had ever tasted. A unique flavor. And that's what we're going to share with you. So, okay, we would go there for a treat once in a while. After the year, we came home. And we did not go back to Israel for about 15 years. About 15 years later, we came back to Israel. Now we came back with 4 children. And now, Mamma Mia's had also enlarged. Instead of the tiny little place, they had moved to an old, beautiful stone home on King George, kind of across the street from the Plaza Hotel, across the street from the park. And it was a beautiful building. You could sit inside, and you could also, they had a gigantic courtyard. And it was just magical. There were trees, there were flowers, it smelled beautiful, and the food was fantastic. And we used to go there, and it was our favorite restaurant. We would go there with our family, went there with friends, and we always ordered at least one order of eggplant Parmesan, which absolutely always hit the mark, that special, unique flavor that we had never tasted anywhere else, and it was still there, and it was, what a great pleasure to go to this place. So, one night, we were there with our family, and it was late. We had a beautiful meal. We were sitting outside. It was warm. It was gorgeous. The food was amazing. The wine was great. Everything was fantastic. And I thought to myself how much I really love this version of eggplant Parmesan. So I decided I would see if I could learn how to do it. So the restaurant was very late. The restaurant was almost empty. So I walked into the kitchen, and it happened that the chef was there, and he was not so busy. And I told him this story about how we had enjoyed it since we were married, and I asked him, would you please be willing to give me the recipe? And the amazing thing is, he said, yes. And he gave me the exact recipe, and I wrote it down. And here's what's even more amazing. When we came home, I made it. A lot of times when someone gives you a recipe, when you try to make it, it doesn't exactly taste the same. But when I made this at home, it was exactly the same taste. And it really, every time we make it, it brings back the memories of that fantastic place and those great experiences. So that is that's the recipe that we want to share with you, tonight. Now, the ingredients list that I gave you is for 6 to 8 main course servings. You can divide it, you can multiply it, you can make one large pan, you can make several smaller pans. It freezes very well. If you make it and then freeze it, to defrost it, here's what you do. You just defrost it, let it come to room temperature, heat it in a 350 Fahrenheit oven until it's bubbly. for the last 15 minutes of heating it up, just add a little bit more of both of the cheeses on top, so you have a fresh layer of cheese on top, but it works very, very well. Let's go through the ingredients. So 2 large onions that are chopped, 10 cloves of garlic chopped. If you want to use more, you can use more. 3 cans of crushed or ground tomatoes in heavy puree. So the key here is that it needs to be thick, and I'm going to show it to you in just a moment. If you see that the sauce that you have is not thick enough, you can add some tomato paste, but you want it to be very thick. You also need a pinch of sugar because the tomatoes from a can can be a little acidic, so you need to add just a little bit of sugar, taste it that it's not too acidic. Then the seasoning, black pepper, red pepper flakes to taste. We like it a little spicy. If you want to add, fine. If not, not. Lots of dried oregano. If you happen to have some good red wine, you can add half a cup. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. It happens that when I was making this batch of sauce, I had some white wine open. I added half a cup of that. Either way, that's fine. You're going to need olive oil. And here, if you have extra virgin cold pressed olive oil, it will really come through in the taste of the final dish. Otherwise, whatever kosher olive oil you have is fine. If you can get fresh basil, it's really key. Now, fresh basil has an amazing, pungent, beautiful aroma and taste, and it's very fragile. So if you're going to use it, you want to add it just at the end. So I wouldn't have gone to the store especially to buy this, but it happens that we had some basil here. I just chopped it up right now. I've already made the sauce, and the sauce is cool. And now I'm just going to add it into the sauce at the last moment. I want to cook it as little as possible in order not to destroy the flavor of this fresh basil. So fresh basil is now in. You're going to need eggplant Parmesan. So you are to slice them about 1/4 inch thick slices. You will need kosher salt. This is important. It must be kosher salt. Table salt will not work. And I'll explain what we do with that in just a moment. And then you need cheese. So I called for 2 cups Parmesan cheese and about 3.5 cups mozzarella cheese. So the proportion is about 60% mozzarella, 40% Parmesan. It does make a big difference. If you buy the cheese in a block and you grate it yourself when you use it, it does make a difference. But if that is an effort that you are not up to, feel free to buy and use grated cheese. So here's what I already did. And I had suggested to you, if you want to cook along with us, I had suggested to you to do this prep in advance. But if you didn't, don't worry. You can take this recipe and make it at your convenience. So last night, late at night, before I went to sleep, I sliced the eggplant. I salted it with kosher salt. Now, the reason for salting it is because the eggplant has lots of moisture. So I want to be able to remove as much of the moisture as possible. So I salted it with kosher salt in order to remove as much moisture as possible. I put the salted eggplant in a colander, and the colander inside a larger bowl, and I put it in the refrigerator overnight. If you don't want to do it the night before, you could do the same thing and just leave it out on the counter for about 6 hours, so you could have started this morning. And what you will find is, at the end of that time, in the bowl is a lot of dark liquid that you want to discard. So you just throw that away. Do not rinse the eggplant. It will be very wet. And here's the next step that we do with the eggplant. So you want to preheat your oven to 400. And you want to take flat sheet pans and place the eggplant. First, spray it with cooking spray, Pam or some kind of cooking spray. Put the eggplant in a single layer, and you want to bake it for about 15 minutes. that will remove the moisture that is on top. And after it comes out of the oven, this is what it looks like. So this has been salted overnight and then baked in the oven at 400 for about 15 minutes. If you have a convection oven, you can make 2 or 3 pans at the same time. Just make sure that they are cooking evenly. And now you have eggplant that is ready to go. Now, the next thing you will need is the sauce. So this sauce is a little unusual. So I made a big pot of it. I made it last night. And here's what's unusual about this sauce. So first of all, you take just a teaspoon of oil and you saute the onions for a couple of minutes, add the garlic, saute the garlic for another minute. Then you add the tomato that you're using. You want to stir it well. If you're using wine, you want to add the wine. And then you want to add the pinch of sugar. And then you want to add the seasoning. This sauce is the only seasoning of the entire dish. So it needs, the seasoning of this sauce needs to be bold, aggressive seasoning. So a little bit more oregano than you might think, a little bit more pepper than you might think. If you're using basil, add it now when it's cool, just before you're about to bake it. But no salt and no olive oil. Because we salted the eggplant, that will provide all the salt that we need. If we added salt to this sauce, it would be too salty. And we are going to have more olive oil with the eggplant. If we added any to the sauce, it would be too much oil. So it's all about balance. So by omitting the oil and omitting the salt, it's going to come out just perfect. Just as a hint, if you make more sauce than you need, it's great sauce. You can use it for anything, for pasta, for pizza, for anything. But just make sure if you're going to use it for something else, you're going to need to add a little bit of salt and a little bit of olive oil to let it taste like regular, normal red sauce. So you want that to cool, and then we're going to start to saute and put it together. Now, this dish is perfect for Shavuos. First of all, it's special, it's festive, it's delicious, and it's dairy. And on Shavuos, our custom is to eat dairy foods. Why do we eat dairy foods on Shavuos? So there are several reasons for this. Let me share one of the classic reasons. It goes like this. Shavuos commemorates that the Jewish people encountered God at Mount Sinai, and God spoke to the entire Jewish people at Mount Sinai and obligated us in all of the mitzvahs, all the commandments. So as soon as Hashem had finished speaking, there was a very important question. What are we going to eat for lunch? As each person, each family went back to their tent, they realized their dishes were treif because they had not been keeping kosher before. The meat that they had was not kosher. They had no food to eat because it was all non-kosher. And so the quickest meal that they could put together under those circumstances was a dairy meal. And for that reason, it is a custom to have dairy foods on Shavuos. Now, I want to tell you something fascinating. The origin of this dish, eggplant Parmesan, according to some scholars, it originated with Italian Jews several centuries ago. They wanted to develop a kosher version of the classic Italian lasagna, which of course has meat and milk in it. And they substituted eggplant for the meat, and that is eggplant Parmesan, a Jewish dish that was developed specifically to be a kosher version of a non-Jewish dish. So how appropriate is it to enjoy eggplant Parmesan on Shavuos when the actual origin of the entire dish is the same reason as the custom of having dairy on Shavuos? Now, we're going to come to the next step, and I need to move the camera. So, Stu, this would be a moment. If anyone has a question, you could let me know.
So far, it doesn't look like anyone's asking anything. Let me unmute people for a second. Oh, hold on, Esther. Here you go. Unmute.
I noticed that you didn't peel the eggplant. Can you peel the eggplant?
So I would not peel the eggplant because the peel of the eggplant is going to be an important element of the taste. Now, I don't want to tell you what to do, but if it was me, I would not peel the eggplant.
Okay, thank you.
Now,
So let's
Ruth.
see.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hold on, we got Ruth. Hold on. Caroline, you're next.
Yes, Ruth.
Okay.
Hi, do you pat dry the eggplant?
No, not necessary, because when you take it out of the colander, it will be wet, but putting it in the oven for 15 minutes will dry it out. As you see, let me just show you this one more time. This is what it looks like when it comes out of the oven, so it's quite dry. So you don't want to rinse the salt off, and you don't want to dry it off. Just put it right in the oven, and that will make it perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. Caroline, you're up.
So how thick is the sauce supposed to be?
So let me show you. This is the sauce, and
Okay.
it's quite
Can you put it up? Because I
it's
can't
quite thick. Can you see?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, it's quite thick.
Can you make
Now,
that?
yes.
Can you just show that one more time? I really didn't see it.
Sure,
Just trying to make sure the house doesn't burn down.
sure.
Just push your camera down. No, you got to put your camera. Okay. Okay, let it
There you
go. Okay.
So it's quite thick.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
How
Now,
many eggplants?
so it's in the recipe, and I'd be happy to send you the ingredients list. I will just say this. I'm not such an expert at being able to figure out how much of each thing I need. I usually get a little bit extra. So as you can tell, I've already made most of the eggplant. The next step that I'm going to show you, I've saved a little bit to show you what the next step is. So I think the recipe called for 3 or 4 large eggplant. That would probably do. You might have a little bit left over. Okay, so Stu, if you could mute everyone now, because this is a little.
You're good to go. Everyone's muted.
Okay. Now, so this is really a critical step, and this really makes it unique. So what I'm doing is I have a non-stick pan. You see this one's pretty small. I did a lot of it before. I was actually using 2 pans at the same time. If I had a larger one, I would do it, but I like this pan. So I want it to be hot. I have a medium-high heat, and I'm going to saute this eggplant in the olive oil. Now, it takes a little time to adjust the temperature so that it cooks rapidly. What you want is, you want it to caramelize. You want it to get a dark color, but not brown. Let me show you one piece that is ideal. This is what you want it to look like. Not dark brown, but not burnt. If it's burnt, then it's a problem. I'll show you another piece. This is perfect. Dark brown, and it's that caramelizing that will give it this unique flavor that will it really makes it absolutely unique. The eggplant needs to cook about 2 to 3 minutes per side, depending on the heat, depending on how thick it is. And so you need to adjust the heat, move it around a little bit. For each batch, for each batch that you make, you do need to add additional olive oil. So again, but you are going to drain it. So once you cook it, you're going to put it on this draining pan, or you could drain it on paper towels to remove more of the oil. Either way is fine. But you want it to be able to cook pretty quickly and get very dark, but not brown. And I usually end up turning it a couple of times just to make sure it cooks evenly. Okay, I assume everyone can see that. You can have 2, even 3 pans going at the same time. You just have to be able to concentrate and not forget about any one of the pans, because if it burns, then it is not usable. So you want to make sure that you're sautéing it. And again, this really is the key that makes this recipe unique. Now, I recognize that there are extra steps in this recipe. I recognize that. However, the truth is, I'm making a very large amount. It really doesn't take that long to do, and it's really pretty easy. This is really the only step that's a bit critical. You want to make sure that the sautéing goes exactly the way it needs to go. But this really is the key. I like using a non-stick pan, which is what I have here. It just makes it easier. You could use a regular skillet. It might take a little bit more olive oil to make sure that it doesn't stick. There we go. It's starting to turn. Starting to turn. Let me just show you a piece. Right. This is perfect. This is what you want. That's what you want it to look like. So when it is like that on both sides, know that you are ready to go. And so what I'm going to do. These are all about ready. I am going to turn this off. I'm going to add these to the draining rack that I was using. And now I need to move the camera back one more time. So if there are any other questions too, this would be a good time. But just give me a moment to move the...
What is the temperature of the oven?
Not the oven.
The stove?
The stuff medium high, but basically you want to adjust the temperature so that it cooks and gets dark brown with about 2 to 3 minutes per side. So it's somewhere between high and medium high, and you will have to adjust it as you're doing the cooking. Hold on, that's not quite where I need it. 1 second. You will have to adjust the cooking up and down a little bit just to make sure that it's all right.
Martine, it said here that you had a question too.
Yeah, hi. Actually, that's exactly the same question I had because I'm doing it at the same time as the rabbi's explaining it. So I really did, because I don't have a gas stovetop, so I just wanted to have a sense of how high it needs to be.
Yeah, so it will probably be high, but just get ready to turn it down a notch if it starts to burn. You don't want it to burn.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're good to go.
All right. Now let's put it together. So what I'm going to do is I have this pan of lots of eggplant that I did earlier today. Just the last few pieces I did now. And what I'm going to do, any kind of size pan, this is a 9x13, this is a low pan, and so what I'm doing now is, just because of who the eaters are within our family this Shavuos, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make one of these small loaf pans for now, but it's the same process no matter how large a pan or how small a pan. But the only thing to keep in mind about the pan is you want as deep as possible, because you're going to layer sauce, eggplant, cheese over and over. You want at least 5 layers. It would be great if you could get 7 layers. And what I do is, if I have these tin pans, I just turn the edges up just to get a little bit more height. And since it's going to be full, when I bake it in the oven, I put it on a tray so that nothing drips over. So let's just start with this. I'm gonna spray it with a little bit of cooking spray, just so it doesn't stick. And then the layering goes like this. You start with a little bit of sauce. And the idea is you want thin layers. So just a little bit of sauce just to cover the bottom. 1 second. Okay. This is the bottom layer that I did. Now I'm going to add eggplant. So here it's important that you have a complete layer that is one full layer. And what I often find I have to do is to cut a few pieces to be able to have them fit. So you want one complete layer. Second. Okay. Layer like this. And let me just show you again. That's the eggplant layer. And then cheese. Again, thin layer. Always Parmesan first, then mozzarella. So a little Parmesan, a little mozzarella, about this much. That's it. Now, over and over again. When you put in the sauce, you want to be able to mash it down, to push it down, again, so that it forms a complete layer with no spaces. And again, a thin layer. You want thin layers here. So that is the sauce. Now, eggplant. Cutting it in half here, here. It's a little bit like doing a puzzle here. You want to have every spot covered. Okay, here you go. That's what it looks like. Then sauce. Just a little bit. Make sure it's covered. Make sure you're filling in all the little holes so that it's a flat bed of a layer. Then cheese, first Parmesan, then some mozzarella. Okay, then eggplant. Eggplant. Just to show you. That's my layer of eggplant. Then a little bit of sauce. Again, spoon it out so that it fills in all the cracks and the crannies and the holes so that you have a thin layer. And then the next layer of cheese. Parmesan. Mozzarella. Thin layer, just a little bit. Now we start again. Eggplant. We'll see how many layers we can get. Actually, I did not count since the beginning. I wish I would have. Maybe Stu has been counting, so that we'll have a.
I haven't been counting. Maybe Ruth, you have a question. Were you counting?
I think this is 4.
It's maybe 4 or 5. I'm not sure. Okay. Well.
Elaine says 4. I'm going to go with what Elaine says.
All right.
But
Sauce.
Ruth, you had a question.
Yeah, I wanted
Yeah.
to know where you buy a kosher block of Parmesan.
Any of the grocery stores,
If they have it.
they either have it or they don't have it. Marcy, where did you get this? Marcy bought this at a dollar. Sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't.
Under normal circumstances, every kosher grocery, every IGA has it, but like they were all out because they're always out of everything. So, normal times you can find it anywhere.
Cool. I muted her. So now you guys are back up.
Okay?
Well, actually, does anyone else have any
And that
other
is it.
questions?
I'm gonna hold that up close.
Does anyone else have any
Yes.
questions once we're pausing and we're going to see what it looks like up close?
That is what it looks like up close, filled all the way to the top. I think it's 5 layers.
Esther, you got a
Like,
question?
yes, yes. Is each layer different? You seem to be doing different things at each layer. The
It
first,
could be that I made a mistake, but what I meant to be doing was sauce, eggplant, cheese. Sauce, eggplant, cheese. That's what I meant to be doing.
but that's not what you were doing, but okay. Sauce, eggplant, cheese. Okay, thank you.
During a global pandemic, it's okay to make a couple mistakes.
Okay.
And that's it.
Does anyone
And
else have
that's
any
it.
other questions?
Now I want to add something else. Again, so this goes into an oven at
Can you send
350
it to
degrees
Toronto?
Fahrenheit. I'm sorry? Did someone have a question?
Could you send some to Toronto?
I can send the recipe. That's about as good as I can do. I wish I could do more, but if you send me an email, I'm happy to send you the recipe. Again, once this is finished, it goes in the oven, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, uncovered, for about an hour and a half, about 90 minutes, and then it's perfect. You could eat it then, you could freeze it. And again, if you're going to freeze it, then just defrost it to room temperature, heat it up at 350 till it's bubbly, and just add a little bit more cheese on top so you have a fresh cheese layer, first Parmesan and then mozzarella. So I want to add just one more thing. So there's one more reason why we have dairy foods on Shavuos. There are many more reasons, but one that I want to mention. The commemoration of Shavuos is the commemoration of the meeting of God and the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. You can understand that meeting in legal terms. It's the moment when the Jewish people became obligated to observe the commandments. There are a lot of other ways to understand it as well. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is a description of events in Jewish history using romantic and poetic metaphors. And there is, on the surface, the work of Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is a love song between a lover and beloved. And the beloved, at one point, says to her lover, Dvash v'chalav tachas l'shonech. I'm sorry. The lover says to the beloved, Dvash v'chalav tachas l'shonech. I have placed beneath your tongue sweet milk and honey. Our sages understand that that phrase is actually describing in poetic terms, in romantic terms, the moment of the encounter between God and the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. When God and the Jewish people meet and God gives the Torah to the Jewish people and obligates us to observe the Torah, it is as if God has placed something sweet and delicious under our tongue. Because we do not look at the commandments of the Torah as burdens. We do not look at it as something that is difficult or something to be rushed through. We look at the mitzvos, at the commandments, as something to be savored, to be enjoyed, knowing that they will ennoble us and enrich us. And what we really celebrate on Shavuos is our attitude towards the Torah that we receive on this day. We celebrate our attitude that it's not just something that is a burden, not just something that obligates us, but something that is sweet and beautiful and delicious. And because, our sages say, because the moment of Shavuos is described using this metaphor of milk and honey placed under our tongues, the metaphor for receiving the Torah at Sinai, from there also we have the custom to have dairy foods on Shavuos to remember that metaphor. What a fitting dish to use to be able to celebrate this holiday. It is delicious, it is dairy, it is festive. So I hope that you'll make it, I hope that you'll enjoy it, but whatever you have, I want to wish you a very happy and healthy Shavuos, Chag Sameach.
We miss you.
We miss you. We look forward to seeing you soon. We have a lot of other programs coming up and events coming up just over the next few days. So please look for our emails. If you're not getting our emails, please let me know, and I will make sure that you are on the list. We have lots of things going on.